Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to give it a little bit of a moment to make sure everyone that was in the waiting room can be on before we get started. And I will just let you know that we are recording this so that we are able to share this webinar with our friends who weren't able to join us live today. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining us this morning for the webinar around the early childhood performance factor and using database decision-making to improve outcomes for young children. I am Carrie Kennengeiser, the Program Director for South Carolina Partnerships for Inclusion, and I'm joined by my colleagues this morning.
Hi, I'm Melissa Griffin. I'm Technical Assistance Coordinator here at South Carolina Partnerships for Inclusion.
Good morning. I'm Sherry Evans. I'm the Early Childhood Special Education Coordinator in the Office of Special Education Services.
My name is Andrea Cannon, and I am a data analyst here at the State Department of Education.
Wonderful. And this morning, we are going to explain the key factors of the early childhood performance factor and how they impact early childhood outcomes. And then we're really going to look at both indicators 6 and 7, explain what they measure, and explore strategies to improve those pieces of data. This is just an overview. If you were able to attend our session at Summer University, this will be very familiar content. What is different is we took those questions that you asked during that session and we were able to get some answers for you. Also, throughout the webinar, if you have additional questions, feel free to use the Q&A and the chat to get those in there. We will do our best to answer them in real time, and if we are not able to in the moment because we have to connect back with others at the State Department, we will make sure to get that and send that out to you all. So with that, again, welcome. We want to know a little bit more about who is joining us today. So if you'll let us know what your primary role is, you should see a poll popped up in front of you. And if for some reason your role is not on there, please feel free to add that to the chat so we know who's with us this morning. Thanks again for sharing your morning with us to learn more. And with that, we'll jump right in. Go ahead, Melissa.
All right. So we just want to make sure before we get started that everybody's on the same page with the least restrictive outcome or least restrictive environment. Sorry, it's Monday, and early childhood outcomes, and why the updates have been made. Okay, so previously, um, it was kind of like a give me, right? So we were just going off of whether or not the course had actually been completed at entry and exit for your students. And so you were automatically awarded 3 points, regardless of how those children did in their progress. And so we wanted to kind of go over the changes that have been made to the performance factor and talk a little bit about how that'll be calculated. So for least restrictive environment, you can see that there's scores here that go up to 1.5, and that's because the performance factor is split between least restrictive environment 6A and child outcome summary 7. So you can see here at 0 would be the current LRE is lower than the target, state results, and previous year indicated needed growth. 0.5 would be that it meets or exceeds previous year's data but does not meet the target and state results. 1 would be that it meets or exceeds state results but below the target. And 1.5 would be that it meets or exceeds the target. So that would be how many points you would get for 6A. Next slide. And then for child outcome summary, it's separated very similarly in the points category, but the criteria look a little bit different. So 0 would be if the COAS outcomes are less than a target, state results, and the previous year results. 0.5 would be if 4 or more of the COAS outcomes meet or exceed the previous year's COAS outcomes, but they're still below the target or the state. And 1 would be 4 or more COAS outcomes meet or exceed the state results, but fall below the target. and 1.5 would be awarded if 4 or more of the coast outcomes meet or exceed the target. So that's what the coast would look like. Now, next slide, please. We're going to put those together, and then that's where your 3 comes in. So you have a possibility of 3, 1.5 from least restrictive, and 1.5 from the child outcome summary, which then equals your district determination in early childhood. Next slide, please. So you might be wondering, why are we changing this? Why is it being updated? Why now? So I want to make sure that everybody knows this statement. In all cases, placement decisions must be individually determined on the basis of each child's abilities and needs and each child's IEP, and not solely on factors such as category of disability, severity of disability, availability of special education and related services, configuration of the services delivery system, availability of space, or administrative convenience. And that is from the Federal Register. So this is super important. That's kind of the basis for why this is being looked at. And we're going to go into the data that explains why it had to be updated. Next slide, please. Okay. So let's look at the data. So we're going to focus on 22-23 today, just because that was readily available across the board. There's some more recent data later in the presentation. But if you look at this graph from ECTA, you can see that in 2022-2023 school year, 42% of children attending a regular early childhood program and 42% of children were receiving the majority of their special education services in that regular early childhood program. And 30% were children who did not attend a regular early childhood program, who received their special education services in a separate class, separate school, or a residential facility. So let's look at South Carolina. So let's take a look at this. And this is that, remember, that was national data at 30% or 42%. This is our South Carolina data. So if you look on the line, FFY 2022 data, you'll see that for 6A, we had 32.16%. So we are about 10% below the national average. And then for 6B, we are actually higher than the national average, and that's not in a positive way. So you always want the 6A to be higher and the 6B to be lower, because those are the kiddos that are in that separate class. We want that to be as low as it can be, and we're actually higher than the national average on that. So that's how South Carolina is doing. So let's look at districts. So if you look at this, we took the districts throughout the state and kind of put them in a graph so that you guys can see. So keeping in mind that 32% is South Carolina as a whole, let's look at this variation here. So if you're way down here at the beginning of our graph, thanks, Carrie, then you will see that that's hardly any. So our districts that are on the right side are actually bolstering up some of those districts. So there's a very big discrepancy across the state as to how districts are participating in 6A. So that's why we have this performance factor in place. So how do we help move the needle? Carrie?
Thanks, Melissa. So in addition to everything that Melissa just shared, we know that all children with disabilities should have access to high quality, inclusive early childhood programs where they're provided with individualized and appropriate supports to enable them to meet high expectations. The research is clear for the last several decades. There are benefits across the board for children with disabilities, children without disabilities, as well as families, educators, and systems. And there are lots of federal documents that support this and lots of state documents that support this. The federal policy statement on inclusion of children with disabilities in early childhood programs was re-released in November of 2023. And we have our local guidance around least restrictive environment, and this does also pertain to our preschool students. And again, straight from IDEA, we know that our students with IEPs, with disabilities, must be provided to the maximum extent appropriate, right? That access to the general education setting and curriculum. So what is indicator 6, right? We're in the education space. We know there's kind of alphabet soup and all of these terms we throw around. So this particular measure measures the percentage of our preschool children with IEPs, so that's ages 3, 4, and 5, not yet in kindergarten, who are enrolled in a preschool program. And the categories are broken down as such, like Melissa mentioned. Category A includes the regular early childhood program. The children are in that program and they're receiving the majority of their services for special education and related services within the regular early childhood program. Category B, they are attending a special education class, a separate school, or a residential facility, so a separate segregated location outside of access to their typically developing peers. And category C refers to those students who are receiving their special education and related services in the home. We will share with you, if you weren't at Summer University, we also have a Padlet that was there. We will show this in a moment as well, but all of the resources that we're talking about this morning are on that Padlet. So this is the decision tree for preschool educational environments, and this is a very helpful tool as you're going through this process to enter the data pertaining to where a child is receiving their services. So you'll really just follow this tree. Is the particular kiddo enrolled in a regular early childhood program? If that is yes, then you'll think about how many hours they're receiving, at least 10 hours a week or less than 10 hours a week. Then you'll go down and you'll answer the question about where does that particular child receive the majority of their hours of special education and related services. If they are in a program at least 10 hours a week and receiving the majority of those special education services within said program, there's the code that you would enter. If they're in an early childhood program receiving less than 10 hours a week, for less than 10 hours a week, you would still go through this process. Are they receiving the majority of their services within that program? This is the code you would enter. Or are they in one of these, whether it's for less than 10 or at least 10, but if they're not receiving their services in that early childhood setting, if it's some other location, which we'll talk more about, then there is a different code that you would enter. And these pieces are not captured in the data that we shared. On the flip side, then we know if they're not attending an early childhood program, then we're going to go with no. And then where are they? Are they in a special education program? If it's no, we're going to go through this. They might be at home. If they are not getting at home, they might be getting their services in some other location, like a speech language provider's office. If we go to that they are attending a special education program, then we're going to think about where, right? Are they in a separate class or self-contained class? Are they in a separate school, or are they in a residential facility? And we don't have as much time this morning as we did at Summer University. So if you want more opportunities to practice how we would look at this, or to look at how do you put this information within the Ed Plan system, Melissa and I are happy to connect with you to work through that. This is just an abbreviated version of what we did in 3 hours for Summer University recently. So here's one piece of practice. If we have Trixie, a 3-year-old girl who qualifies for special education services due to autism, she attends Fuzzy Bear Childcare on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., so for 4 hours a day for 3 days, while her mom goes to a part-time job. The childcare works with the local school district with an itinerant teacher to embed her goals and any accommodations she uses into the daily routine. Trixie also receives 30 minutes per week of direct instruction with an occupational therapist and a speech language pathologist at the center who provides those services in her classroom. So if we go through the decision tree, is Trixie enrolled in an early childhood program? Yes, because she's in that Fuzzy Bear childcare. How many hours does she attend that program? At least 10, because from my math, she's there for 12 hours, 4 hours a day for 3 days. Where does she receive the majority of her services? Within that regular early childhood program, because those therapists push into the classroom to provide her services. So that's what we would code, and that would count towards our 6A data. Are there any questions in the chat or the Q&A related to this? So some wonderings based on this might be, okay, well, what are examples of a regular early childhood program? So an early childhood program is anywhere that a child can be receiving their education that is licensed. So Head Start, Early Head Start, First Steps programs, our CERDEP funded preschool classrooms, our district funded classrooms, private kindergartens or preschools, community childcare centers. So we know that preschool is a bit different from our school aged options, and there are many, many places that a preschooler can be going to school. So why do the preschool environments data matter? Well, we know that if we have access to high quality data to use for program improvement, that's crucial that we understand the process of collecting and reporting this preschool environments data. Over time, as Melissa and Sherry and I have worked with various districts or presented at conferences and things often, there is someone that has an aha moment about just the way they're entering data. So we know sometimes when we're looking overall at where we are as a state, part of that is because there's some misconceptions around how do I enter this? So we want to make sure that that's not happening. So here's the information that we have for the last few years for our preschool child count, starting in the 2019-2020 school year and up through 23-24 school year. And this is coming straight from, like I said, IDEA child count. And I will have you note that you'll see a big change beginning in 2020, 2021, and that's because that's how the feds changed how they were looking at this, and they made sure that our 5-year-olds who were in kindergarten did not get included in this category. What catches your attention here? I'm seeing a huge increase of children across the board. If we're looking, again, this number was a lot larger because we had our kindergartners in this data, but if we start from here, every year we are really seeing a lot more of our friends coming to our classrooms in need of services. And then if we're breaking that down and we're looking at, again, at that 23-24 data, and we're breaking it down by a child's LRE, this is again how we look at that. We have a couple kiddos receiving their services at home. And then if we're talking about in that general regular early childhood program, at least 10 hours a week. And then if I go skip over that one and go here, again, in that general education program, less than 10 hours a week. So this is our 6A data. We would see that we have this many children, and this many children. I'm seeing a huge change from 3 to 4, and then even from 4 to 5. And then if we're looking at our separate class, these are our self-contained settings. We've got a lot of students that are receiving services there. A big, big drop. What changes from when I turn 5? And then if I'm going to other location, I'm sitting in a general education placement, but I'm not receiving my services there. I'm receiving my services elsewhere. So that's here. And then again, that's here. And so we've talked a lot about how can we really look at where students are receiving their services and where is kind of their home. Where do they go? What is their classroom when they come to school? So how can we use this data for program improvement? We have some basic questions. How many of our preschoolers are attending that regular early childhood program and receiving the majority of their services in said program? How many children are attending a separate special education program, and then how many children are receiving the majority of their services in home. And here is our land of opportunity, and we saw from the data that we do have quite a bit of children in our state who are attending a general education, regular early childhood setting, but they're not receiving their services there. And so examples of those other locations might be the speech therapy room, might be an early childhood resource room, it might even be a hallway. But thinking through how can we help to make sure our students are receiving services within the early childhood classroom. And remember, we know who makes these decisions. We know it is a full team. And like Melissa said early when we started, it's not kind of based on what we have available, it's based on the individual needs of that child and making sure that families are included as full participants for those decisions. And knowing that we have all of the folks that know the child, right? Their special educator, their general educator, we know we need an LEA representative, et cetera, and so on. So this is a helpful tool that's also on the Padlet in really helping us think about those IEP decisions. Any questions?
We do have one question in the chat. Do we see any concrete reasoning for increased numbers? I've heard a lot of COVID pandemic causing delay, but I feel like as years go by, we're moving away from that reasoning. And I can just add in, we just hear anecdotally from districts, but COVID pandemic has been one. Also, districts have said that children coming to them are coming with some really increased needs. Whether it be cognitive, behavioral, across the board, we're seeing some more children qualifying with autism, but we also have had an increased number of children in our Part C BabyNet program, which has then, of course, trickled over to districts, to you all, as children transition from Part C to Part B services. I will give you just a little tip. Our most recent child count numbers that you'll see soon, that were gathered in October of this past school year, the preschool numbers did go down just a little bit. So hopefully, as those BabyNet numbers are leveling off, we'll see that happen. But it's really too early to say if we're going to see a trend yet, because it's just 1 year of those numbers going down a little bit.
Thanks, Sherry, and thank you for that question in the chat. And with that, we can move into the COAS.
Yes. So, child outcome summary or COAS, and we have a question for y'all. So, when it comes to the COAS, are you at a 1 where you're like, oh, COAS, here comes another acronym I need to know? Are you at a 2? I think somebody in our district completes those. Are you at a 3? I complete the COAS as a case manager for my students. Or are you at a 4 where you're a part of a team that meets to discuss a child's functioning across settings and situations to complete the COAS? So we have a little poll for you, just so we know experience levels. All right, Carrie, can you show our results? Oh, look at that. Okay, so we've got some COAS experience in the room today. Thank you. Okay, so we will kind of breeze over some of this pretty quickly then. So you know then that the COAS is the federal reporting on child outcomes that was developed because the federal government wanted to make sure that what we were doing was producing the desired outcomes. And so back in 1993, Congress mandated it. And then 10 years later, when they did the budget, we had no data. So that is when the coast came to be, so that we could make sure that we are tracking how children are doing from the time that they enter the program to the time that they leave the program in relation to their peers. And so it's a way to look at results. I want to stress that it's not an assessment of any kind. We actually take information and synthesize that for the coast. And that is indicator number 7, which is the percent of children ages 3 to 5 who show improvement on 3 outcomes. And you heard me mention this, that it would be done when the child enters the program and when they exit the program. And that is for both Part C and Part B. I think we had some ahas when we did this in Summer University. So I do want to point out that Part C does this as well. So when a child enters early intervention, they will do the coast, and when they exit, they will do the coast. So it might be very helpful for districts and EIs to work together on that entry into Part B 619 coast, utilizing information from the exit from Part C. You also want to make sure that you're gathering that data within a 6-week period for accuracy. So making sure that it's all very relevant data, that it is compiled from a team instead of just one person. You want to make sure that you have a gen ed teacher who's working with that child, special ed, related services, parents. Everybody needs to put into some information so that we make sure that we get a clear picture. And so there's 3 outcomes, like I mentioned. The first one is positive social and emotional skills. And so that's social relationships. And that's in regards to, as you can see here from this great infographic, relating with caregivers, attending to other people in a variety of settings, interacting with their peers, how they do in social games, social norms, and adapting to changes, and expressing their emotions and also responding to the emotions of others. So that's outcome 1. Again, this is in relation to their same age peers. And so one of the things that came up at Summer University is that as special educators, we want to help. And so we want to say, well, if we do this, then we can get them to do this, and this. But this is in relation to their same age peers. So just keeping that in mind. Okay, let's look at outcome number 2, which is the acquisition and use of knowledge and skills. So that they're interested in learning, that they can do some problem solving, they have purposeful play, they're starting to get some of those pre-academic and literacy skills, acquiring some language that they can communicate with, and then understanding and asking questions. Outcome 3 is the use of appropriate behaviors to meet needs. So this would be something like, pulling a chair over to reach a toy they couldn't reach, moving things around, getting what they want, eating and drinking with increasing independence, dressing and undressing to increase independence. This is all about daily living skills, diapering, toileting, washing hands, communicating needs, and showing some safety awareness. So when we're looking at these 3 outcomes, there are 5 progress categories. So you would have a child that maybe did not improve their functioning in one of those outcomes, improve their functioning, but it's not sufficient to move nearer to functioning comparable to same age peers. You could have a child who has moved functioning level nearer to same age peers, but did not reach it. You can also have a child who has moved their functioning up to a level comparable to same age peers, or that they are already doing that and they are maintaining, which is E. And then you come to your summary rating. So this is an overall picture of how a child behaves across the variety of people and settings in their life at this time in their life. So again, this is the importance of having a team, This is the importance of looking at not just how they're doing in the classroom, how they're doing at home, how they're doing across the board at grandma's or in the grocery store, whatever it might be. And then you're going to take the decision tree. So this is great. This is on your Padlet, and it's really helpful in determining a rating scale. So you would look at, does the child ever function in ways that would be considered age expected with regard to this outcome? And if it's no, then you're going to look at the foundational skills and dig a little bit deeper to see if maybe they're getting closer to where they would be compared to their same age peers. And so this is how you can use this to work through, answer the questions, and get to a numeric rating.
Thanks, Melissa. Just saw a question come through the Q&A.
Great.
So someone wants to know, what do you do when it's time for the exit and there wasn't an entry completed prior to the student coming in?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would want to know why there wasn't an entry completed, but Sherry, do you want to?
I'll be happy to take that one. And Andrea may want to chime into that one too. So you have to have an entry. You've got to have an entry before you can do an exit. So if a child has transferred to you from another district and you don't have an entry, you need to go ahead and do an entry based on the picture of that child when they have come to your district. Okay. So make sure you've got an entry in so that you can then do the exit when it's time. Andrea, do you want to add anything to that?
No, perfect. You explained it perfectly.
Great question. Thank you. Okay. So speaking of questions, we asked you all what kind of questions you had when we did this session at Summer University. And so you asked the questions and we did our best to answer them, as we will continue to do so throughout this session. So one of the questions was, in Enrich, we were able to enter 2 different LRE codes when a child was in transition. But in EdPlan, we're only able to enter 1. How should we address this? Sherry has some updates about EdPlan for you all in regards to this question.
So you are right. In EdPlan, you can only enter 1 LRE at this point. So, and it's based on the October child count. So you need to go ahead and answer that exactly how it's posed to you. So where will the child be as of the October child count? If there is another LRE that comes into play, put that in the prior written notice. Okay. In December, we are going to have an update to EdPlan that will allow you to enter more than 1 LRE placement for a child, but that will be coming in December, and we can give you some more information about that when it's closer to time for release. But for now, answer it exactly as is. Where will the child be as of the October child count? Put any other LRE information in the prior written notice.
Thanks, Sherry. And I think you had mentioned there was another update coming to EdPlan in December.
There is. We are tweaking the BabyNet form a little bit. Many of you asked for it to be a form that could be finalized or completed, because right now the way it is, people could go in and make changes. I would think that they would not mean to, but they could. And that what is entered in the BabyNet form is what feeds indicator 12 federal reporting. So we want to make sure that's accurate, that it doesn't accidentally get changed. We also are taking out some of the fields that were not necessary for federal reporting. And you'll actually be able to print out the form if you want to print it out for your records. That would be for district use only, but so those updates for the BabyNet form will be coming in December as well. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you. All right, what's our next question? Okay, so one of the questions was, why doesn't time spent at recess, lunch, or in physical education with general education peers count towards the least restrictive environment indicator in preschool? We're able to count it for our kindergarteners. And so the answer to that is that they're actually different. Remember when Carrie said that in 2021, they separated out the kindergarteners, age 5 kindergarteners, from the 3 to 5 not in preschool group. And so now the indicator 5 is our kindergarten indicator. And that one does count that because it is just about if they spend 80% or more of their day inside regular class. So that's why that is accountable in kindergarten. But if you take a look next door here, indicator 6 for preschool, you'll see that it's only counted if they receive the majority of their service special education services within the regular early childhood program. So that's where that difference is. And so we really wanted to point that out because I know there was some question about that. But it's all about where they're receiving their special education services for preschool versus the amount of time that they're spending in a regular ed classroom with kindergarten. Any questions on that? All right, so we can go on to our next one. How can we improve our data for children who are placed in general education setting but are receiving their special education services outside that setting? And we talked about that as the land of opportunity. So what are some things that we can do? One would be to build some partnerships with your local early childhood programs and incorporate special education itinerant services. And we can teach you more about that and what that looks like. The other probably more simple um, response would be to work with special education service providers such as, SLPs, OTs, PTs, and develop a classroom-based service delivery model. Instead of pulling children out of the classroom or taking them down the hall, actually pushing into that classroom that they're already in to provide services is the best way to meet those.
Melissa, I just wanted to add one thing to
Yeah.
that. I know it's really a mindset shift, especially for your therapist who've been working for a long time and solely doing pull out. And remember what the guidelines say is it has to be a majority of the services have to be in the classroom. So it doesn't mean you couldn't do some pull out and some push in, a combination of both. It's just the majority of the services have to be provided in the classroom.
That's a great point. Thanks, Sherry. And our next question was, how can we encourage collaboration between general education and special education to increase inclusive practices? And so in thinking about this, you can go to the next slide. In thinking about this, we utilize the collaboration spectrum, which if you participated in our building partnerships COP, we went over this and I will put it in the Padlet for you all as well. But essentially, you're going to want to think about who are the individuals who can influence and advance collaborative work. So you're thinking about your administration because you want to be able to carve out some time, right? Time is probably our biggest enemy. Carving out some time to be able to collaborate, building that mentality and that mindset of the importance of working together. And then developing principles for working together or engagement early on. Helping collaborative members be clear about expectations and commitments. So kind of set it up so okay, maybe we're gonna spend I'm making this up, so y'all have patience with me, but like maybe 30 minutes or so meeting together to talk about all the kiddos that intersect between our gen ed and our special ed, and how we can work together to meet those needs. And then understanding the context of collaboration, the community narrative, data about the issue, understanding how that impact can benefit teachers, because I know I have learned so much in my work from other disciplines. And I know that we all are always looking for support, and that support is there. We just need to build it in and build connections with one another. So this is the importance of collaboration. And then successful collaboratives engage in co-design as a principle of engagement, which leads to co-created visions and strategies. So working together and coming up with a plan for what might work best in your school or in your district to have collaboration between gen ed and special education. Inviting your counterparts to trainings that you attend, events you attend, um, things like that, bringing back information for one another. There's a lot of things that we can do to build that collaboration, but we're going to have to make it a priority because, again, there's a lot that happens in the day that is a priority as well.
And I
So,
would just add that this is something that Skippy can help you with.
yes.
If you're looking at how do we really build that robust team to make sure that we have all those perspectives, all the players that are important to help us problem solve and navigate this together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it looks like we have about 15 minutes left. We do have some resources to share, but I know you probably have more questions. Are there questions that did not get captured on our slides today that you're just really wondering about? Again, we'll do our best to answer them in real time, but if we're not able to right now, we would love to get those so that we can provide you with additional information after the webinar concludes.
Also, if there is types of training or support that you feel like would be beneficial for you in your district, if you would share those with us so that we can make those available to you in a method that would be helpful.
Yes, great point, Melissa. We've been talking a lot about just making sure that we are being responsive to all of the things that you have on your plate. You know, sometimes folks can't get to wherever an in-person training is happening. Other times people are, you know, just they don't want something virtual. They're zoomed out and it's hard to really engage on something that's virtual. So we were thinking about, well, okay, so do we do in-person trainings? Do we do webinars? Is there a community of practice? What are the kind of formats that work best for you or that you're really hoping that we offer? And then again, like Melissa said, if there are other particular pieces that you want to hear more about, if you want to say, I just need an hour for you to sit down with my team that does the, you know, enters things into the system so that I know that we're entering the LRE codes correctly and that we're making sure that goes into EdPlan correctly, we're happy to help. And no pressure, feel free to email us if you think of that. I'm going to pop around a little bit. So you may already have our email addresses. If you have those, feel free to use those. You can also always use our just kind of main program email address, scpi@mailbox.sc.edu. We definitely recommend that you are receiving our newsletter because we don't spam you with that. We send out quarterly newsletters and a few as needed updates, like you will probably see coming out this week around our Early Childhood Inclusion Conference, which we'll make sure to get that information in the chat. But there's lots of ways to stay connected with us and reach out to provide us feedback or ask for what you need. So I want to make sure you have all that. I will go back to that slide for sure. And related to what we've been talking about, there is a course that you can take on Child Outcome Summary. That is a module that is available through the South Carolina Learning Management System. That's 20 hours of professional development for certificate renewal available. Oh, thanks for putting that in the chat, Melissa. And then there is the Child Outcome Summary Knowledge Check, which, Melissa, do you want to talk more about that?
Sure. So this was a collaboration between Daisy and ECTA, and our OSIS team brought it to South Carolina. And it is, once you go through the learning management system module, there is a knowledge check, which essentially tests to see that you fully understand the child outcome summary. And there's a lot of examples in there that will check to see how proficient you are in those rating scales. And so it's been super helpful. for a lot of teams, and I would recommend that you guys check that out. Sherry, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Now, I'm going to put my email in the chat. So if you have any questions about the course, the Coast KC, please reach out to me. I'll be happy to help navigate you through that process. I've got some handouts that you can share with your staff, some things that explain it more to directors. So whatever you need, feel free to reach out.
Thanks, Sherry. And here's that QR code for all of the Padlet resources, which includes the decision trees we talked about today, includes a whole bunch of other resources from ECTA and Daisy. It has, I think, the slides from the longer session that we presented at Summer University, lots and lots of resources. And if you're looking at this and then you're saying, but it's missing this, again, just feel free to reach out to us and we're happy to provide you with what you're looking for. And then, like we mentioned, we are working on some additional resources that will be coming soon around early childhood data. So we really do want your feedback around how you would like for us to provide that to you. What are the types of formats and platforms that, based on all the other things that you have going on in your professional life, would be most beneficial for you? And we will remind you that we have a 4-part recorded webinar series that's available on YouTube, and you can access that directly from our website around using the Division for Early Childhood out of the Council for Exceptional Children. So using the DEC's recommended practices to meet these early childhood indicators. And then again, stay connected with us. Feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have or any needs, ideas for how we could better support. And if you are a social media person, we share information out there as well. We thank you for your time this morning. We're glad that you're able to join us. Give us a day or so, and then the recording of this webinar will also be added to YouTube and our website, and then we'll share that in social media so folks know it's available, and then you can let any of your team members and colleagues know if they wanted to catch up with this. Anything else, ladies? I will just add that I saw a question that came through that Melissa answered around SC Endeavors credits, and I know she answered. We did not get this one registered. However, we are working to get our trainings registered through SC Endeavors for those DSS credits related to the memo that came out. So we can also share some information on how you set up an account, because in order to receive credits, you have to already have a training account through SE Endeavors, but it's not hard. So we will share that as well. And again, we're going to make sure that we get those credits attached to things. So one thing I will say is, in addition to having CEUs at our conference in September, we will also register the whole conference through SE Endeavors. So you'll be eligible for, I think it's like 6 hours of credits for the whole day for the conference. Thank you, Karen. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Please let us know again how we can help. And thanks again for your time this morning, all. Have a great week.